Joining me now is Sean Bell, who's a retired Air Vice-Marshal and an advisor for Universal Defence and Security Solutions. Sean, thanks again for joining us. So a lot of speculation about how Russia is remassing and heading into the east. Do you think that's what's happening?
Well, first thing I'd always say is I would never believe what the enemy was saying about the battlefield. Deception is a key part of any war fighting. What we can see is that Russian troops have withdrawn from Kiev, but what the next move is very much in Putin's mind, and nobody can read that at the moment. What we can read is satellite imagery is showing very clearly that there are Russian forces moving south past Kharkiv, and also the airfield at Dnipro is being targeted. Why there? Almost certainly because that's an air resupply route for Ukraine to get supplies back into the Donbass. It's also worth reminding everybody that Donbass, the fighting has been continuing there for 10 years. Our attention has been drawn to the capital and other higher profile places, but the fighting has never stopped in the Donbass. And although it might take, Western analysts believe, 2 to 3 weeks to get Russian forces re-brigaded ready for the fight there, as we're hearing from some of the Ukrainian leaders, they're expecting the next phase of fighting to be particularly brutal and vicious.
OK, well, it was interesting, wasn't it, that Boris Johnson was in Kiev this weekend and announced a whole host of military aid. What do we know about what he's announced?
Well, I think, first of all, the NATO Secretary-General has been trying to coordinate some of this aid because there's lots of well-intentioned efforts to get military equipment into Ukraine. But, of course, the danger is you end up with lots of disparate equipment, which doesn't actually help the Ukrainians at all. The one thing that the UK has always been on the front foot of providing aid to Ukraine, over 200,000 items of military equipment are provided. The most recent is the Mastiff armoured personnel carrier shown here, which is a very capable platform blooded in Afghanistan. The challenge when we get bigger equipment like this, there's a lot of talk about tanks going in as well, is that the bigger the equipment, the more support you need with it. That's just a piece of equipment. A capability is equipment plus spares, plus expertise to support, plus ammunition, and, of course, ultimately training. It's not easy driving one of these things.
Yeah, if you send that in, how long will it take someone to learn how to operate that?
Well, it's one thing to drive it, which would be relatively quickly. What you're seeing here is the outside steel outside of it. Yeah. Inside, it's packed normally full of very clever, very highly sensitive equipment, which does take quite a lot of training. I understand that a lot of that's been stripped out for it to be deployed, so it's largely just an armoured personnel carrier. But the point being, these things do take a lot of time and training before they can be usefully deployed.
Well, that's my question now. How useful are they? And is this what Zelensky actually needs?
Well, what Zelensky has said, I want weapons, weapons, weapons. What's pretty clear is that daily Ukrainian forces are attacked from the air and attacked from the ground. So from the air, Zelensky has regularly asked for a no-fly zone, which at the moment NATO is reluctant to provide. So he needs weapons that can take out aircraft from the sky. There's around 250 sorties a day being launched by Russia. So that's quite a big threat. On the ground, obviously, anti-tank weapons. What we have provided the UK is Javelin, NLAW and Starstreak weapons, which have proved very, very effective in the hands of the Ukrainians. But it's one thing providing them, but where do they come from? What's the supply? You can't just go into a supermarket and buy these things. They are developed by individual nations in partnership with their industry. They take years to develop. They then agree a production line to deliver war stock and some training stock. So undoubtedly, we are reducing our training stock and war stock, which is a political decision, but there's not an endless supply of weapons available. And the final challenge, obviously, is for delivery. It's one thing to say you're going to support Ukraine, but first of all, you've got to get them all the way across Europe to the border, for example, Poland. But once you've got them across the Polish border, you've then got to make the difficult journey all the way to the front line, all the way across Ukraine, which, of course, is an increasingly difficult and dangerous journey. And, of course, time is at a premium.
OK, Sean Bell, thank you so much.
Pleasure.